We know that we've slipped a bit from the debate, and we know that the president has to prove to the American people exactly what he believes, that he's in this to win this, he can do this, he is our nominee, and he's going to be our president for a second term.
All right, that was Chair of the Biden-Harris campaign, Jen O'Malley Dillon, this morning, acknowledging that while there has been a slip in support, President Joe Biden will remain in the race. The campaign's public comments come as NBC News reports today that the president's family has started discussing his exit plan from the 2024 race. And the calls from Democrats on Capitol Hill for President Biden to step aside continue to mount. As we have mentioned, close Nancy Pelosi ally Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren called on President Biden to exit, citing the threat Donald Trump poses. Here she is on the network earlier, laying out her case.
I think it's telling that members of the January 6th committee, myself, Adam Schiff, Jamie Raskin, have all suggested that he step aside and that we get another candidate who can beat Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a threat to America and the world. He cannot be elected. He must not be elected. And so we've asked the president to look at that. Obviously, this is his decision. But it's not about him, and it's not about me. It's about America.
Joining our conversation now, former Democratic Congressman of Ohio, Tim Ryan. The Rev is also back with us. Congressman, it's great to have you on the show. Let's talk a little bit about that messaging and the number of people and whether or not it matters who comes out and calls for the president to step aside, or is it at this point a matter of numbers?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, these allies of Nancy Pelosi, I think the story from Nancy Pelosi's talk with the president and then Mike Donilon, I think those are all indicative of how the pressure that's working its way up through the House leadership, the pressure that worked its way up through the Senate leadership, and then you saw Tester and Heinrich, people who are in cycle running races. Those are signals. And I think what we'll see, I'm thinking that if something doesn't happen here in the next couple days, you're going to see a lot of members of the House. You're going to see more members of the Senate come out. And so I think it's both strategic, but also the volume that I think will be increasing here in the coming days.
What do you personally think is the best path forward? Do you still believe that the vice president should become the nominee for the Democratic ticket? And if so, why are you not hearing more of these politicians who are calling on the president to step aside to also release his delegates immediately to Kamala Harris, to the vice president, to become the presidential nominee?
I don't know. I mean, I've watched her through her 3.5 years. I campaigned with her in 2020. She's a compelling figure. I think we've seen in the last 2 or 3 weeks her really get her voice, hit her stride. She understands the international and domestic issues inside and out. And I just see her as someone who could absolutely both prosecute the case against Trump in the campaign sense, not let him get away with what he got away with in the debate, not let him get away with what he got away with last night, 22 lies last night, 30 from the debate. She would not let him get away with that. And then you look at the issues that we have to run on, the choice issue, the justice issues, the economic issues, where we've reindustrialized the country, and she's been a part of the most pro-union administration in the history of the country, probably since Roosevelt. Like, she could deliver that message. She's going to energize our base. She's going to pull in young people. But I think most importantly is that this country is dying for an aspirational message about how we can lift America out of this morass that we've been in really since the Vietnam War, where we had this toxic politics. People are ready for aspiration. Artificial intelligence, how do we dominate it? How do we use that to improve our healthcare, improve our education? The blockchain, how do we reinvent government? How do we heal veterans with new ways of healing trauma? How do we build chips and electric vehicles, all this stuff that we want to do here in the industrial Midwest? Like, she could elevate this conversation. And I just want everybody to know, do you realize how small Donald Trump will look to a Kamala Harris into an elevated message like that? He's going to shrink. And during the debate, she will destroy him. And America can come together around healing and cooperation. I just think a generational change puts us at a significant campaign advantage and messaging advantage. And I think we blow Trump out, and I think we win the House, and I think we have the chance to hold on to the Senate.
Rev, there, obviously when President Biden campaigned as a generational, transitional president to the next generation of Democratic leaders. Kamala Harris was that choice as the vice president. Obviously now she, by anyone's estimate, would be the front runner. But you're not seeing more Democratic politicians who are calling on President Biden to step aside to also make her or choose for her to be the nominee or to endorse her.
Well, one of the things that I think that is very concerning to a lot of us is, one, not to appreciate what Joe Biden has done and to get into this whole thing of trying to push him off the stage in this way. As we talked about, I talked to him last Monday, but weekend before last, I spent some time with Vice President Harris in New Orleans at the Essence Music Festival. No one is more loyal standing by the president than Vice President Kamala Harris. I mean, in private, one-on-one, and we've known each other 25 years. She said, Al, we've got to stand by the president because what we've done together. Having said that, who would be better to defend his legacy, even if he's still there as he defends it, than the one who did it with him? That was his co-pilot. What qualifies Kamala Harris is everything that was just said. But what qualifies us, he chose her to be the person to, in case of anything, to step in that seat. And he reiterated it this week. And I think that it is extremely important. For me, if it falls a lot, and I'm not calling for this, but I'm saying if it happens that Kamala Harris is there as the presidential candidate, because I cannot see if Joe Biden, for any reason that I could not figure out, steps aside, it would have to go to her. No one would be able to explain it.
And there's also the Democratic argument that out of all of the primaries held, both her and the vice president have received the 14 million votes from the Democratic primary voters. So it goes to her.
When we voted for Joe Biden, we voted for him to say, and this is who can take the reins. So anything else would be very unacceptable. But if that were to happen, it would be the battle of all time to have the prosecutor against the felon. I would love to see the prosecutor versus the felon. That would be a debate to have. One had to check on their schedule. The other had to check with their parole officer. Could they come to the debate?
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.